The gas giant Earthborn had no sunrise. It just sat there outside the porthole, orange and slow, like it had nowhere to be and did not care who was watching. Dara Ose was watching. She sat alone at the far end of the mess hall with her tray, fork in hand, eating something the Academy called grain porridge. It tasted like wet cardboard. She ate it anyway. Back home on a mining belt, cardboard-tasting food was still food, and you finished it. She had learned early to come to the hall before it filled up. The benches near the food line got crowded fast, and crowded meant contact, and contact with certain cadets meant something she did not feel like dealing with before the day even started. So she came early. She sat near the porthole. She looked at the gas giant. She ate her cardboard. The Academy was called the Galactic Coalition Training Station, but everyone just called it the rack. It sat in orbit around Earthborn and held around 900 cadets from more than 30 species. Dara was one of 3 humans admitted in the current cycle. The other 2, a boy from Dublin and a girl from somewhere in coastal Japan, had already filed transfer requests. Their bunks were empty. Dara had not filed anything. She was still thinking about that when the far door slid open and Rook walked in. He was tall the way a stack of gray sticks is tall, thin-limbed and careful with his movements, his wide yellow eyes scanning the room the way they always did, checking exits and corners out of pure instinct. Velnari did that. Their home world had enough predators that looking for danger before sitting down was just good manners. His eyes found Dara. He crossed the room and sat down across from her without asking. He did not need to ask. That was the thing about Rook. He had sat across from her on the 3rd day when every other cadet had made a point of sitting somewhere else, and he had put his tray down and started eating. And that had been that. She nodded at him. He clicked his tongue twice, which meant something like good morning in Velnari. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then the main doors opened and the hall started filling up. Most cadets came in groups, sorted by species. That was not an official rule. It was just how things happened. Drathi came in loudest. They were broad and armored-looking, with thick ridged skin and voices that carried without trying. Soren was always at the front of whatever group he was in. He was a senior cadet, 3rd year, and he had the kind of confidence that comes not from ability but from never having been checked. Dara watched him for the corner of her eye. She did not stare. Staring was an invitation. Soren moved through the hall, and the cadets around him gave room. Not because they liked him, because it was easier. He stopped at the food line, collected a tray, turned, and scanned the room. His eyes landed on Rook. Dara set her fork down slowly. Soren walked over. Not with urgency. He walked the way someone walks when they already know what they're going to do and nobody is going to stop them. He stopped right beside Rook's tray and looked down at him. Rook did not look up, but Soren's elbow moved. It was a casual motion, barely anything. The tray went off the edge of the table and hit the floor with a flat metal sound. Porridge spread across the tiles. A few cadets nearby looked over. A few looked away. The hall kept going. Soren looked at Dara. She looked back at him. That was all that happened. He held her gaze for a moment, waiting for something she was not going to give him. Then he moved off toward his usual table, and his group followed, and the noise of the hall swallowed the whole thing like it had never happened. Dara got up. She picked up the tray. She carried the spilled bowl to the disposal and got Rook a fresh set from the side counter. She put it in front of him and sat back down. Rook's hands were flat on the table. They were shaking slightly. She did not say anything about that. She picked up her fork and ate. After a moment, Rook picked up his fork too. They finished breakfast. Around them, the mess hall was full and loud and did not care. Outside, Earthborn turned at its own slow pace, orange and enormous and indifferent to everything beneath it. When they stood to leave, Dara found a notice on the message tab, clipped to her tray. She picked it up. That IT read, Integration Assessment Scheduled. Cadet Osei D. Reporting date 0600, Cycle 14. She had heard of integration assessment. Every human cadet who had passed through the rack had eventually been scheduled for one. Neither of the 2 humans before her had made it past the first round. She folded the notice and put it in her front pocket. Rook looked at her. She shook her head once, which he had learned meant not yet. He nodded and followed her out. Behind them, the mess hall went on. The gas giant went on, and Dara walked the long corridor back to the bunk room and thought about her father's voice and a wall she had not found the edge of yet. The notice stayed in Dara's pocket for 2 days before she told Rook about it. She told him on the way back from weapons familiarization, a class where cadets were introduced to Coalition standard field equipment. Most species handled the kit easily. Dara's hands were slightly too small for the standard grip configuration. The instructor had not offered an alternative. She had adjusted and said nothing. Rook listened to her explain the integration assessment without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in careful common tongue, that both previous human cadets had left before their second assessment. He had looked it up. Dara told him she knew. He asked if she was planning to leave too. She said no. He looked at her the way Velnari sometimes did, eyes very wide and very still, like they were trying to read something written in very small letters. Then he nodded and did not bring it up again. The next day, Soren found a different angle. The drill was a standard team coordination exercise. Cadets were paired and sent through a sequence of obstacles that required them to work together, pass equipment, cover each other's movements. Rook was paired with a Drathi cadet named Beld, one of Soren's circle. The pairing was random, supposedly. Dara doubted it. Halfway through the sequence, Rook's sensor harness malfunctioned. Without it, the system logged him as absent from key positions, and absent meant failed. He came through the course physically clean, but the scoring board posted a red mark next to his name. Beld's harness worked fine. Dara watched from the waiting line. She watched Rook stand at the end of the course looking at his harness, turning it over in his hands, finding the connector that had been pulled just loose enough to lose signal without appearing obviously broken. She watched Soren at the edge of the group, not laughing, not saying anything, just watching Rook with flat eyes. Instructor Bale posted the results without comment. Rook received an academic warning. One more failure meant a review board. A review board meant possible removal. That evening, Dara went to the observation corridor that IT was not an official space. It was a maintenance walkway running along the outer hull on the station's lower level, and the rule against cadets being there after curfew was the kind of rule that existed mostly on paper. The corridor had a long strip of transparent panel running its full length, and through it you could see the stars without any filter or frame. Dara sat on the floor with her back against the hull and looked out. She thought about the mining belt. She thought about the year the company cut the air recyclers to save money, and every family in Block 7 started getting headaches by midday, and her father had gone to the company office every single day for 3 weeks until they fixed it. Not angry, not loud, just present, just refusing to go away. He had told her, when they put you against the wall, you do not run. You learn the wall. You find out exactly how solid it is and exactly where the weak points are. And then you use that. She pulled a small notebook from her inner pocket. She had been keeping it since the first week. Dates, times, incident descriptions, names of cadets who had been present. She flipped to a clean page and wrote down today. The harness, the connector, Beld's position during the drill, Soren's position, the time the results were posted. She wrote it all down in her small, flat handwriting and then closed the notebook and sat with the stars for a while. When she got back to the bunk room, Rook was still awake. He was sitting on the edge of his bunk with his long legs folded and his hands clasped, staring at the floor. He told her he was thinking about requesting a transfer. She asked him to wait 1 week. He looked at her for a long time. His yellow eyes caught the low bunk light and held it. He asked what difference 1 week would make. She said she did not know yet, but she was working on it. He breathed in slowly, the Velnari way, expanding his whole narrow chest, and let out again. Then he said, fine, 1 week. She thanked him. He told her not to thank him, that she was the only person in the entire rack who had picked his food up off the floor, and that counted for something regardless of what happened with the rest of it. She turned off her bunk light. In the dark, she heard Rook settle onto his mattress, the soft creak of the frame taking his weight. Across the corridor, 2 Drathi cadets talked too loud and laughed about something that did not translate. Dara looked up at the ceiling and thought about weak points. She thought about the harness connector and who had access to equipment storage and when. She thought about Subcommander Yelva's name on every integration assessment result she had ever been able to find in the public records. She thought about Instructor Bale standing at the results board, looking at Rook's red mark and then walking away. She did not know yet if Bale was the wall or the door, but she had 1 week to find out. The physical conditioning results were posted publicly. That was coalition policy. Transparency in assessment, it was called. What it meant in practice was that every cadet on the rack could see, on the board outside the main training hall, that the human cadet in the current cycle had scored in the lowest 12% across all species categories. Dara had read the board on her way in. She had kept walking. The session that day was a survival relay. The premise was simple. One cadet was designated the injured party. Their partner had to carry them through a course of obstacles, hand-over-hand barriers, balance sections, low-ceiling crawls, a final uphill incline. The course was designed around Coalition's standard load tolerances, which assumed a carrier of average size for the dominant enrolled species, which meant it was designed for Drathy. Rook was not Drathy. But the system assigned partners by bunk rotation that cycle, and Rook's rotation landed him with Dara. When the pairing list went up, there was noise from a group. Not all of it was subtle. Someone near Soren's cluster said, in common tongue, that the human would drop the Velnari on the first obstacle. Someone else said she would not even reach the first obstacle. Soren himself said nothing. He just looked at the board and then looked at Dara with something that was almost curiosity. Dara looked at the course map on the wall panel. She looked at Rook. She calculated. Rook weighed more than Coalition standards considered manageable for a human carrier. Not by a small amount. His frame was long, and his bones, while thin-looking, were dense in the way of prey world species that had needed to be fast and hard to break at the same time. Carrying him was, by the numbers, outside what human physical capacity was rated for. Dara had grown up moving or crates in low-G corridors that the lifts could not reach. The numbers were a guide. They were not the end of the conversation. She told Rook to get on her back and hold at the shoulders. He told her this was a bad idea. She told him she had worse ones, that he got on her back. The first obstacle was the hand-over-hand section. She moved slow and deliberate, hands finding each grip, weight distributed, legs steady. She did not try to rush it. Rushing was how you fell. She crossed the section. The timing sensors logged it. She kept moving. The second obstacle was the balance beam, narrow, with a short gap in the middle. She stopped before the gap, shifted Rook's weight, stepped across. She heard him make a sound, a short Velnari exhale that meant something close to I cannot watch. She kept moving. The crawl section was the hardest. Low ceiling, rough floor, no room to carry anyone properly. She set Rook down, told him to move beside her, half-carried, half-guided him through the section with her shoulder under his arm and her spine bent at an angle that was going to ache for a week. They came through the other side slower than anyone else on the course that day. The incline was last. 40 meters uphill open. By then her legs were talking to her in a clear and unfriendly way. She did not put Rook down. She found the thing her father had called the second floor, the part of your effort below the floor where you thought your energy ended, the reserve that only opened when you stopped asking if it was there and just needed it. She walked up the incline. She crossed the finish line. She set Rook down carefully on the platform at the top and stood with her hands on her knees for a moment, breathing. They had not finished first. They had not finished second or third. They had finished behind 11 other pairs. But they had finished, and the timing sensors had logged every step, and the result board would show completion. Nobody in the watching group said anything for a moment. Then Cadet Wira, an insectoid Fenori who had been standing at the edge of the observation section for the whole run, turned to the cadet beside them and clicked several times. The other cadet, a young Velnari, looked uncertain and asked what that meant, that Wira's mandibles moved through something approximating a common tongue translation. She should have put him down on the third obstacle. She did not calculate the cost. The Velnari cadet did not know what to say to that. Instructor Bale stood at the scoring console at the edge of the course. He had been there the whole time, arms crossed, watching. He did not look impressed. He did not look dismissive. He looked like a person who had seen a great number of things of his long career and was adding this to the list without deciding what category it belonged in yet. He did not mark Dara down in the bunk room that evening. Rook sat beside Dara on her bunk while she stretched the ache out of her back. He was quiet for a while. Then he told her that no Velnari cadet had ever carried a partner up that incline without stopping at least twice. She told him she had stopped. Twice. He probably had not noticed because she had stopped for about half a second each time and then kept moving. He looked at her. He asked if she ever just stopped. She thought about it honestly. Then she said, not if someone else needed her to keep going. Rook did not respond to that. He just looked at the floor for a moment with his wide yellow eyes, and something in his posture changed just slightly, like a frame that had been holding itself at an angle settling back to square. The next morning, Dara found a new notice in her message tab. Soren had filed a formal complaint against Rook. Equipment theft. The hearing was scheduled in 48 hours. She read it twice. She folded it. She put it next to the first one in her pocket. Then she opened her notebook and started writing faster. Dara did not sleep much that night. She did not waste time feeling bad about that. She used it. The Academy's internal network had a public records section. Anyone with a valid cadet ID could access training logs, drill results, equipment checkout sheets, and room assignment records. Nobody had told Dara this. She had found it herself in the second week by reading the station's information index from beginning to end on a rest day, while everyone else was in the common area. It had taken 4 hours. It had been worth it. She sat with her notebook and her small personal reader, and she worked through the records the way her father had worked through the company's maintenance logs all those years ago, slowly, without skipping anything, looking for the shape of it. The equipment checkout sheet for the day of Rook's harness failure showed that 2 cadets had accessed the storage bay in the hour before the drill. One was a Funori cadet picking up replacement grip tape. The other was Beld. The sheet showed Beld had checked out one item. The log listed it as a calibration tool. Standard. Unremarkable. Except the calibration tool was returned 40 minutes later, and the timestamp on Rook's harness failure during the drill was 32 minutes after Beld had entered the bay. Dara wrote it down. She cross-referenced Soren's complaint against Rook. It cited 3 specific incidents of alleged equipment mishandling, each with a date and a location. She pulled the room access logs for each location and each date. Rook's ID did not appear in any of them. In 2 of the 3, Beld's ID did. She wrote that down too. She filled 4 pages of a notebook before the station's quiet cycle ended, and the lights came back up. In the morning, she went to Subcommander Yelva's office. Yelva was drafty, older, with the particular stillness of someone who had long ago decided what kind of person they were and had no interest in revising it. She sat behind her desk and looked at Dara the way some people look at a piece of furniture they have not decided where to put yet. Dara put the notebook on the desk and explained what she had found. She kept her voice even. She did not editorialize. She stated dates and log numbers and let the sequence speak. Yelva listened without moving. When Dara finished, there was a pause. Then Yelva said, in careful common tongue, that Dara's interpretation of the logs was creative. She said that equipment access records were not incident records. She said that the complaint against Rook had been filed by a senior cadet in good standing and would be evaluated by appropriate personnel through the correct process. She said that humans were new to the coalition and sometimes struggled to understand how things worked. She slid the notebook back across the desk without opening it. Dara picked it up. She said thank you, which she did not mean, and left, which she had planned to do regardless. She walked to the training wing. Instructor Bale kept an office at the end of the drills corridor, a small room that smelled like machine oil and old documentation. His door was open. He was inside with a mug of something and a wall full of assessment charts. He did not look up when she stopped in the doorway. She asked if she could come in, but he said if she had something worth his time. She came in. She put the notebook on the edge of his desk and stayed standing. She walked him through it, shorter this time, just the key points, the equipment log, the timestamps, the access records, the 3 cited incidents that did not match Rook's location data. Bale listened. He didn't look up. He looked at her the whole time she was talking. When she stopped, the office was quiet. Through the wall, she could hear the muffled sound of cadets in the drill corridor. Bale asked her why she was still at the rack. She had not expected that question. She thought about answering something that sounded good, and she just said the true thing. Because Rook stayed. Bale looked at her for a long moment. Not warmly, not coldly. The way a person looks at something they're trying to measure accurately. He reached across the desk and picked up a notebook. He turned it over once in his hands. He did not open it. He told her the hearing was in 22 hours and that she should not be late to it, and that she should bring her reader with the access logs pulled up and ready, not just the notebook. She asked if he was going to do something. He said he was going to read her notes tonight. After that, it would depend on whether the notes held up. She said they held up. He told her that was exactly what someone who had not slept would say, and that she should go eat something and then sleep for at least 4 hours and trust that the facts were either solid or they were not, and rest would not change that. She went and ate. She slept for 4 hours. She pulled the access logs and had them ready before the hearing. The hearing room was a small formal chamber off the main administrative corridor. Sub-Commander Yelva was already seated at the head table when Dara arrived. Soren was there. Rook was there, very still, very quiet, with his hands folded and his eyes tracking the room. Yelva called the session to order. She began reading the complaint. The door opened. Instructor Bale walked in and placed a formal review request on the table in front of Yelva. He did not sit. He stood and stated, in the flat and exact way of someone who had been doing this for a very long time, that the complaint contained material inconsistencies with station access records, and that he was requesting the proceeding be suspended pending a full documentation review. Yelva looked at the document. She looked at Bale. She looked at Dara. The hearing was suspended. Rook was not expelled. Soren's record was now flagged for review. Walking out of the chamber, Rook did not say anything for a full corridor length. Then, quietly, he asked how she had known Bale would help. Dara said she had not known. She had just decided that the facts were worth showing to anyone who might be willing to look at them, and Bale had always seemed like someone who looked. Rook thought about that. He said that was a very human way to approach a problem. She said most human ways looked crazy until they worked. The investigation did not stay quiet. Bale's formal review request opened a record, and records in the coalition system had a way of pulling threads. Other cadets, mostly non-drafty, had filed quiet complaints over the previous 2 cycles that had been received, logged, and then placed in a category of the system called unsubstantiated allegation, which meant they had gone nowhere. The review flagged 5 of them, then 9. By the end of the first week, it was 14. Soren's group went quieter. Not gone, not yet, but quieter. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from uncertainty about what the ground is doing under your feet. Rook retested for his failed drill assessment and passed it cleanly with a different partner and a harness from a sealed checkout kit that had not been in the shared bay. His academic warning was lifted. He came back to the early mess hall breakfast and sat across from Dara with his tray and did not say much about it, which was how both of them prefer to handle good news. That IT was in the second week after the hearing that Cadet Wira found Dara in the corridor outside the equipment room. Wira was Funori, four-armed, with a narrow angular head and a clicking pattern of communication that most species found difficult to follow. Dara had been studying the common tongue approximations of Funori clicks in her spare time. Not because she expected to need it, because the sounds were there and she wanted to understand them. Wira stopped in front of her and stood very still for a moment, which Dara had learned was a Funori way of asking permission to speak about something that mattered. Dara stood still too, which she had read was the appropriate response. Wira clicked for a while. Then, slowly, in careful and unpracticed common tongue, she said, "My people have a word. Urotvel. It means the one who does not calculate the cost of another." She paused, her mandibles moving slightly. Then she said, "You are the first non-Funori I have ever called that." Dara did not know what to say to that immediately. She thought about it genuinely for a moment and then said, "Thank you," and that she was still learning the worth of Funori words, but that one sounded like something she would want to keep. That Wira's clicking came faster for a second, which was, Dara believed, laughter. They stood in the corridor a moment longer and then went their separate ways, which felt right for both of them. The harder moment came 3 days later. Soren found Dara alone in the lower passage near the laundry units. It was a blind stretch of corridor, no sensors, just pipes and gray wall, and the hum of the recycling system. She did not know if he had followed her or if it was coincidence. She suspected it was not coincidence that he stopped a few body lengths away. No group this time. No audience. That he told her she had made an enemy. That he said it simply, like a fact being stated, not a threat being performed. That almost made it worse. Dara looked at him. She thought about several possible responses. Then she said the true one. She told him she had been making enemies since she was 12 years old on a mining colony in the Outer Belt where the company cut the air recyclers to save money. She told him that the families in Block 7 had headaches every afternoon for 3 weeks, and that her father had gone to the company office every single day until they fixed it. She told him that the company had eventually hired 2 security personnel specifically to discourage her father from coming back, and that her father had kept coming anyway, and that the recyclers had eventually been fixed. She said she was still here. Her father was still there. The company had since been audited 3 times. She said she was not particularly afraid of being someone's enemy. She had some experience with it. Soren looked at her for a long moment. She could not read his face well. Drathy expressions did not translate cleanly to her eyes, but she could read his posture. Something in it was recalculating. He walked away. She let out a breath she had been holding and stood in the empty corridor for a moment, listening to the pipes. Her hands were not shaking. She was a little surprised by that. She noted it and moved on. That evening, Rook asked her if she was afraid. They were in the bunk room, lights low, the station in its quiet cycle. He asked it carefully, not as a challenge, just as a question from someone who genuinely wanted to understand. She said yes. He looked surprised. He asked why she never showed it. She thought about how to say it in a way that was honest and not dramatic. Then she said, "Showing it cost me nothing. It is just a feeling. Letting it stop me costs everything else." Rook looked at the ceiling for a while after that. His wide yellow eyes caught the low light and reflected it softly. She could hear him thinking, which with Velnari was almost a physical sound, a very faint shift in their breathing rhythm. That he said, quietly, that he thought humans were very strange. She said she knew. He said he thought it was good, though strange in a useful direction. She told him that was about the best review a human could hope for in this part of the galaxy, and that she was taking it. He made the Velnari sound that meant something between amusement and agreement, and the bunk room settled back into quiet. The next morning, Bale called her to his office. She went in with her reader and her notebook out of habit. He told her to put them away. She did. He told her the integration assessment scores from Cycle 14 had been sent for a secondary review. He told her that under Coalition standard her numbers fell short. He told her that there was a secondary category called Operational Standard, which measured adaptive performance across uncontrolled scenarios, and that under that category, reviewed by 3 independent assessors, she had passed. He told her he was recommending her for advanced placement. She did not say anything for a moment. That he told her not to make him regret it. She said she would do her best. He told her her best was apparently considerable when applied under pressure, and that pressure was not something the advanced track was short of, and that she should prepare accordingly. She walked out of his office and stood in the corridor for a moment with the light coming through the panel overhead and the sound of the rack going on around her. She thought about calling her father on the next available communication window. She thought about what she would say. She decided she would just tell him the recyclers were still running. That he would understand. 3 months changed things in ways that were hard to point to exactly. The investigation into Soren's conduct had spread wider than anyone in his circle had expected. 2 Drathy cadets from his group had been formally reviewed. One had been placed on probationary status. Soren himself had not been expelled, but his senior standing had been suspended pending the full outcome, and he moved through the rack now like a person carrying something heavy that he could not put down. He still had allies. He still had presence. But the certainty was gone from his walk, and absence of certainty in a bully is not a small thing. Dara was in advanced placement by then. The training was harder in ways that felt honest. The scenarios were unpredictable, and the evaluators did not tell you what they were measuring. She did well not because she was the strongest or the fastest, but because she paid attention and she did not quit, and she had a particular talent for finding the practical solution inside the complicated problem. Rook had retested for 2 advanced modules and passed both. He was quieter about it than she was, which was saying something, since she was not loud about anything. But she could tell from the way he carried himself now that something had shifted. The Velnari habit of checking exits when he walked into a room had not gone away. It probably never would. But he was not bracing for impact every time the door opened. Wira had become a regular presence at the edge of their orbit. Not exactly a group, nothing formal, Just 3 cadets who occasionally ate in the same section of the mess hall and sometimes walked the same corridors at the same time and understood, without saying it, that there was something in that. The intake day came on a Tuesday in the station cycle. New cadets arrived in the main bay off the docking ring, a wide open space with high ceilings and orientation signs in 16 languages. Dara was passing through on her way to a late equipment check when she heard the sound of it, that particular quality of noise that comes from a large group of people who are new somewhere and trying very hard not to show how new they are. She slowed down. There were about 60 new cadets coming through processing. Various species, various ages. And there, standing near the back of the group with identical expressions of careful neutrality, were 2 humans. Young, maybe 17, maybe 18. A girl with short hair and dark eyes who was watching the room the way Dara had once watched rooms, cataloging everything fast and quietly. A boy standing beside her with his shoulders slightly raised, the posture of someone ready to absorb an impact. Dara recognized that posture. She had worn it herself, a Drathy cadet from the current second-year group, someone Dara did not know well, was moving along the edge of the new intake group. Not doing anything yet. Just circling, slowly, with the relaxed attention of someone who had spotted something interesting and was deciding what to do with it. Dara changed direction. She walked over and stood between the Drathy cadet and the 2 humans. She did not raise her voice. She did not say anything aggressive or make any particular show of it. She just stopped there and looked at the Drathy cadet with the calm and level attention of someone who had all the time in the world and no particular interest in moving. The Drathy cadet looked at her. She looked back. He moved on to IT. Took about 4 seconds. Dara turned to the 2 new human cadets. The girl was looking at her with cautious eyes. The boy had let his shoulders drop about 1 centimeter, which was probably everything he had. Dara told him the early mess hall schedule ran from 0500 to 0630 and that arriving before 0600 meant a quieter room. She told them the 3rd bunk row in the human-rated quarters had the best air circulation. She told them the equipment storage bay had a secondary check-in counter on the left side that most cadets did not use and that it was almost always faster. Practical things. Small things. The girl asked her how long she had been at the rack. Dara said 7 months. The girl asked if it got easier. Dara thought about that honestly. Then she said, "It gets clearer. You start to see the shape of it. Once you see the shape, you know where to stand." The boy asked what happened if you could not find where to stand. She told him you found the wall. Not to stop at it, not to turn around. You found the wall, and you learned it, and you figured out what it was made of, and then you figure out how to go through that. He looked at her like that was either very wise or made no sense at all. Maybe both. She told them she would be around if they had questions and that they should find food first because orientation briefings ran long and the station catered to Drathy metabolism schedules, which assumed no one needed to eat more than twice a day. Then she left them to it. She found Rook and Weira at the observation corridor that evening. Not by arrangement. Rook had gone there the same way she had, out of some quiet pull toward the long panel of stars, and Weira had followed Rook, and Dara had arrived last to find them already there. The 3 of them stood at the hull window. Earthborn was in its slow orange rotation below them. The same as always, the gas giant that did not care who was watching and kept turning regardless. Rook asked what humans did when things felt too large to fight. Dara said they found the wall. They learned it. Then they went through. Weira clicked softly. It was a short sound, just a few notes. Rook listened and translated, his voice low and careful. Urathvel. All 3 of us. Dara looked at the stars. She let that sit there for a while, solid and real, the kind of thing that did not need any words added to it. Outside, Earthborn kept turning, and the wall, wherever it was, had no idea what was coming for it.